You know that feeling, right? You go on a retreat, or maybe you just get a weekend completely to yourself, and suddenly there's this incredible peace, this clarity. You feel like, okay, I've got it figured out. The world is quiet, your mind is still. But let's dive into why that feeling can be so fragile, and what it really takes to make that inner peace stick around for good.
Yeah, we all know this state. It's that perfect peace you find when you manage to step away from the chaos of your daily life. You know, in the quiet of a controlled environment, it can feel like you've reached some kind of enlightenment. It feels powerful, serene, heck, it might even feel permanent. But what happens when reality comes knocking at the door?
Because let's be honest, as soon as you step back into your actual life, that doorbell rings, the phone buzzes, you get a text from a difficult family member, and just like that, poof, that profound peace just evaporates. And this brings up a really important question. If our inner calm can survive contact with just ordinary life, is it a genuine transformation, or was it just a temporary escape?
A really helpful way to understand this whole process is to look at the ancient metaphor of alchemy. Now, it's not actually about turning lead into gold. It's about transforming the very substance of yourself. And here's the kicker. This process isn't a one-way street. It's a cycle of turning inward and then returning to the world.
Okay, so the first half of this cycle is what the alchemists called hermetic reflux. This is the way in. This is your retreat, that time of solitude and deep introspection, and it is absolutely necessary. This is where we go to concentrate our inner heat, so to speak, to refine who we are, far away from all the world's distractions.
But then comes the second part, and you could argue it's the most important phase of all, reintegration. This is the way out. And listen, this is not a failure. It is not you regressing back to your old life. It is the rigorous testing of your transformation. You have to bring that newly refined self back into the real world to see if the changes actually hold up under pressure.
You know, we see this exact pattern in all our great stories. It's the classic hero's return. But the thing is, in real life, this return journey isn't about slaying one last dragon. It's usually super undramatic, it's humbling, and it's found in the most boring, mundane parts of our lives.
So, how do you actually know if you've changed? How do you test this new, transformed self? Well, the proof doesn't come from some grand spiritual challenge. No, it comes from the friction of ordinary, everyday life. Let's really dig into what that means.
So yeah, you can forget about the epic trials and mythical beasts. The things that are really going to reveal whether you've changed, well, they're way more common and, frankly, a lot more frustrating.
Seriously, can you handle small talk? Can you engage in those kind of mundane conversations at a party or at the office with genuine patience, without that little voice in your head telling you you're above it all? What about criticism? How do you react when somebody disagrees with you or critiques something you did? Is your immediate gut reaction to get defensive, or can you actually listen with a bit of objective curiosity?
Oh, and this is a big one. Doing the dishes, folding the laundry, filling out paperwork. Do these kinds of repetitive tasks just fill you with dread and a sense that your precious time is being wasted? Or can you actually be present while you're doing them? And finally, boredom itself. Can you just sit with it? Can you just be bored without immediately reaching for your phone or some other distraction? I mean, this is honestly one of the hardest tests there is. All of this points to a really cool alchemical concept called prestige stripping. It's all about burning away that sneaky part of our ego that wants to be seen as special, as enlightened or spiritually advanced. And returning to your family home or your old job is the perfect test for this. It strips away all the pretense and shows you if you've really changed or if you've just built yourself a new, shiny, spiritual identity. Okay, so how in the world do we navigate all these inner challenges? Well, ancient alchemy actually offers us this fascinating map for our modern minds. It's called the Alchemical Week.
This map is pretty brilliant. It shows how these ancient archetypes map almost perfectly onto our modern psychological states. So you see each day is linked to a planet and a metal, and it represents a different kind of inner struggle. Take Tuesday, for instance. It's linked to Mars and iron. Mars is the god of war, right? Well, that maps directly to anxiety. It's that fighting energy turned inward on yourself. Or Friday, Venus, the goddess of love and desire, linked to addiction. It really suggests there's this archetypal order even to our most personal struggles.
So just take a second and look at this map. Which one of these archetypal struggles really resonates with you right now? Is it that Martian anxiety, the heavy, leaden feeling of Saturnian limitation?
or maybe that Venusian pull of desire. Just identifying your day is the very first step to navigating the territory of your own mind.
And that's the absolute key, right there. Moving from just looking at the map to actually walking the territory. There is a massive difference between understanding these ideas in your head and truly living them in your body.
This slide just nails that distinction. On one side, you have consolidation. That's thinking about the work. It's reading the books, listening to talks, drawing the map. It's safe, it's intellectual, but it's not the work itself. On the other side is integration. That is doing the work. It's actual behavioral change, it's messy, it's risky, and it's the only thing that creates real transformation. It's the difference between knowing the path and actually walking it.
So how do we start walking this path? Well, the process unfolds in a sequence of returns, basically a series of expanding tests. First up is the domestic return. Can you go home and live with your family without needing special treatment? Then comes the economic return. Can you go to work without feeling like your job is beneath you? And from there, it expands out to the relational and finally the communal, testing if you can really participate in society without that feeling of superiority or cynicism.
Okay, so let's bring all this home. Here is a super simple challenge for you to try, to move you from just looking at the map to actually walking the territory.
I want you to choose one of those stressors we talked about earlier, either engaging in small talk or doing some kind of menial task, and just do it for 15 minutes. That's it. But while you're doing it, watch your mind like a hawk. Watch for that subtle, sneaky feeling of superiority, that thought that says, "Ugh, I'm too advanced for this." If that feeling comes up, and it probably will, that's it. That is the impurity the alchemists were talking about. That's the work you have left to do.
And I want to leave you with this incredible thought from the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius. He said the mind adapts and converts to its own purposes the obstacle to our acting. What that means is the obstacles, the small talk, the boring tasks, the criticism, they aren't just getting in the way of the work, they are the work. True transformation isn't about creating some perfect, frictionless life. It's about developing a mind that can take any obstacle, any frustration, and convert it into the very fuel for your growth. So what obstacle will you convert today?
Have you ever had that feeling? You know the one, where you feel like a stranger in your own life, like you're suddenly on the outside looking in. Well, in this explainer, we're going to talk about why that feeling isn't some problem you need to solve. It's actually a powerful signpost on a journey of really deep personal change.
Okay, let's just dive right into this. This image, I think, gets right to the heart of what we're talking about. That profound sense of alienation, the one that can kind of bubble up when you're doing serious inner work. It's not a bug in the system. It's a feature. It's a predictable, and you could even say necessary, stage of transformation.
You know, this ancient astrological text just frames it so perfectly. That loneliness, that feeling of being separate, is directly connected to a gift, the freedom to see the world and even yourself in a totally new way. It's almost like the price of admission for a much wider perspective.
So why does this actually happen? Well, as you start to dismantle all those old conditioned ways of being that tie you to your culture and your social groups, it's only natural to feel a bit untethered. You're literally becoming a stranger in a land that used to be completely familiar.
And this right here, this is the core experience we're talking about. It's this dual-layer state where you are both the actor in the scene and the audience watching from a distance. You're participating, sure, but there's a part of you that's just observing the whole thing with this strange sense of detachment.
Now, this feeling isn't just some vague weirdness. It actually has a name, and understanding what's really going on is the absolute first step to skillfully navigating this part of your growth. Let's talk about the emergence of the witness.
Okay, so think of the silent witness as a kind of built-in safety mechanism. While the surface of your mind might be in total chaos, this deeper vantage point stays calm and totally neutral. It's like this stable ground you can always return to, a part of you that just isn't caught up in all the drama.
But, and this is so important, there's a crucial line to draw here. The line between healthy witnessing and clinical dissociation. Witnessing is an alert, present state. You can still connect with people. Dissociation, on the other hand, it feels numb, absent, and it's really distressing. Getting this distinction right is absolutely vital.
So what does this look like day to day? Well, here are some of the signs. You might find you just don't care about office politics anymore. Small talk feels exhausting and just fake. You're suddenly super aware when people aren't being genuine, and you find yourself constantly checking your own intentions. All of this can make normal interactions feel a little bit artificial.
And this brings us to a really critical point. How do you keep this whole experience on a healthy track? Because there's a very fine line between transformative detachment and a harmful slide into total withdrawal or even delusion.
This table is basically your field guide. Look at the difference. In the healthy stage, you might not care about gossip, but you can still connect genuinely. You feel like a curious observer. But if it slides into pathology, that becomes total withdrawal, feeling unreal, and maybe even paranoid thinking. This is your diagnostic toolkit.
So as you start to let go of your old identity, the mind can rush in to fill that empty space with some really tempting new stories. These are what some traditions call skanda demons, these seductive fantasies that you're uniquely special, or that dark forces are out to get you, or that you have some secret mission to save the world. The witness is what helps you see these thoughts come and go without believing them.
And if you start to spot these red flags in yourself, that's a clear signal to ground yourself, and fast. Viewing other people with contempt, thinking of them as NPCs, or cutting everyone off, that's not enlightenment. That's just your ego running wild. This is exactly where healthy alienation can tip over into harmful delusion.
Okay, so this all sounds pretty intense, right? How do you actually manage this feeling and find your way back into the world without losing all the progress you've made? Well, here are 2 incredibly practical tools for a skillful re-entry.
So here's the first tool, and honestly, it might seem a little counterintuitive. When you start seeing through all of the social games that everyone plays, it's really easy to get irritable or frustrated with people who seem to be, sleepwalking. But that feeling of superiority, it poisons your own mind. Kindness isn't just about being nice, it's a technical requirement to keep your own system stable. And this is your practical toolkit, built on 4 qualities you can actually cultivate. First up, metta, or loving kindness. It's the perfect antidote to irritation. Just silently wish someone well. Then you've got karuna, or compassion, which counters indifference. Just try to identify one struggle they might be facing. For envy, practice mudita, or sympathetic joy. Silently praise one of their good qualities. And finally, upekkha, equanimity, which helps with bias. Just remind yourself, they own their karma. These are tiny internal shifts that can completely rewire how you interact with people.
And here is the second, and this one is kind of mind-bending. The tool is realizing that this gap you feel between your inner self and your outer mask, it isn't special. It's universal. Everybody feels it. The only difference is you've just become conscious of it. We are all avatars. You just happen to get a peek at the source code. All right, let's bring this all together now. Because with these tools, we can completely reframe this entire experience. What starts out as this profound sense of isolation can actually become the doorway to an even deeper kind of connection.
Feeling alien doesn't have to mean you're alone.
In fact, it reveals this hidden truth, the secret kinship you actually share with every single person.
Everyone is navigating that same gap between their inner world and their outer performance. Your awareness of that gap is the bridge, not the barrier.
So here's the challenge, the takeaway. The next time you're in a room full of people and you feel that familiar distance, that sense of being an alien, try this. Just look at someone and remember that they too have a secret inner world. In that shared hiddenness, see if you can find a flicker of connection instead of separation.
All right, let's dive into a really powerful idea from our source material today. We're going to explore how to reframe every single challenge you face, not as an obstacle getting in your way, but as your own personal training ground.
I mean, you know that feeling, don't you? That flash of irritation at a coworker, that sharp word to a family member, and it's followed by that immediate wave of just, why did I do that? And we tend to beat ourselves up over these reactive moments. We see them as failures. But what if that's completely the wrong way to look at them? What if they aren't failures at all? Because that's the core shift in perspective right there. They are your training. Every single moment of friction is an opportunity. It's a chance to practice something new. It's about moving from reacting on autopilot to responding with real intention.
Now look, the goal here isn't to become some kind of saint overnight. It's really about breaking the spell of our old conditioned habits. The source material puts it this way. You start to lose the ability to act unskillfully. You begin to catch yourself before the snap.
So this brings us to the central metaphor for this entire idea. And to get there, we're going to redefine a word that, you probably think you already know.
Right? When you hear dojo, you probably picture a clean, quiet hall for practicing karate or judo, a special place you go to in order to train. But the source material completely flips this idea on its head. This is the new meaning. Your dojo isn't some separate, special place. Nope. It's that meeting that frustrates you. It's the traffic jam when you're late.
It's the awkward family dinner, the messy, unpredictable, real-time field of your actual life. That is your training hall.
Okay, so if our whole life is the dojo, how in the world do we actually train? Well, the source material lays out a very clear, really practical protocol for this. The key mechanism that makes all this possible is called the checkpoint. Now, this isn't something you can force. It's more like a little moment of friction, an internal pause that starts to appear on its own with practice. It's that quiet little voice that asks, "Hey, are you sure you want to send that angry email?"
And here's how it works in 3 simple steps. First, you just notice the feeling bubbling up. That's it. No judgment, just awareness of that defensiveness or irritation. Step 2, pause, just for a breath. This gives that checkpoint a moment to engage. And finally, you choose a response that actually serves your long-term values, not just your immediate self-protective instinct.
This table shows the transformation in action. So look at the trigger, hostility. The old habit, the standard reaction, counterattack. But the train response, the one that transforms the situation, you pause and de-escalate. Or how about failure? Instead of shame and hiding, the trained response is immediate ownership and repair. This is the practice, right here.
Okay, this all sounds great in theory, doesn't it? But the dojo of real life has some very specific, very difficult tests that are basically designed to challenge us. So let's look at a couple of the big ones.
And let's tackle a common fear right away. If you practice this kind of open-heartedness, are you just setting yourself up to be a doormat? The source material makes a really critical distinction here.
And here it is. Compassion is not compliance. Compliance is about avoiding conflict because you're afraid. It's rooted in fear. But compassion, that's about genuinely reducing suffering. And sometimes, the most compassionate thing you can possibly do is be firm, state a clear boundary, and say no. It comes from a place of wisdom, not weakness.
All right, let's talk about what might be the most subtle and difficult test of all. You do something genuinely helpful, you act with real kindness, and you get nothing back. Just crickets. Or even worse, you get criticized for it.
This quote is just so insightful. That feeling of resentment is actually a diagnostic tool. It reveals a hidden, ego-driven contract we have with the world. We aren't just doing good, we're doing good in order to be seen as good. And this test is designed to expose that contract so we can finally let it go.
And when we start to let go of that need for a reward, the entire purpose of this training begins to shift. It might start out as a self-improvement project, but believe me, it leads somewhere much, much deeper. The goal isn't to become a perfect person or a spiritual somebody. The goal is simply to become more useful, to reduce harm and be of service. Not because it's some holy mission, but because, as the source says, it's the only logical response to a world in need. This ancient wisdom captures the destination perfectly. True goodness becomes effortless. It doesn't need to check itself in the mirror to see if it's being good. It just acts, totally free from the ego's constant need for recognition.
And this is absolutely crucial. You cannot perfect this practice on a meditation cushion in a quiet room. You have to go out into the marketplace, into the chaos of daily life. That's the only place where those final stubborn traces of self-importance really get polished away.
Ultimately, this whole practice is about embodying this ancient law. It's about realizing that reacting with hostility just creates more hostility. The only thing that truly works, the only thing that transforms a situation, is a skillful, compassionate, and loving response. So, to finish up, I want to leave you with a very practical way to take this out of the realm of ideas and put it directly into your own life, into your own dojo. I want you to try this. The source calls it a motive audit. For the next 24 hours before any act of service, big or small, just pause and ask yourself this one question. The answer is going to tell you everything you need to know about whether you're making a transaction or if you're truly beginning to serve. You know, on the path of personal growth, we all hit this point, a really profound choice. Do we try to escape all the daily frustrations, or do we actually use them to transform? That's what we're digging into today on The Explainer, that exact fork in the road. You've probably heard this famous poem before, right? It just perfectly nails this critical choice. But, you know, these diverging paths, they're not just out there in some forest. They're deep inside us, in our own development. And they force a decision. Are we going to run from our challenges, or are we going to run through them? Okay, so let's zoom in on a really specific stage of this whole journey.
It's a funny thing. It's a point where you get some new clarity, some real insight, but then, surprise, that brings a whole new set of challenges. This is exactly where your wisdom gets put to the test, against all that real-world pressure.
So there's a term for this stage, the once returner. And what it means is you've gained some real wisdom. But, and this is a big but, you're not some detached scholar, just watching the world from an ivory tower. Nope. The real work, the hard part, kicks in when you have to take that new insight and test it out in the messy, totally unpredictable arena of your actual daily life.
And here's the crazy paradox of making progress, right? Your mind, it's sharper now. You see the ego, the patterns in other people with this piercing clarity, but the kicker is you haven't totally uprooted those same patterns in yourself yet. So when you see them out in the world, it can just trigger all this judgment and frustration, maybe even a bit of despair. It's a really crucial point where growth can honestly feel more like a curse than a gift.
So when all this pressure starts to build up, a very, very specific and, let's be honest, an incredibly tempting fantasy starts to take shape in your mind.
Yeah, we start dreaming of an escape. You know that voice in your head? If I could just get through this week, or this awful project, or this family dinner, then I can finally be alone and get some peace. The thing is, this dream is actually pretty dangerous. It works like this hidden contract you've made with the future, and it totally weakens your ability to be present and effective right here, right now.
And this isn't just, idle daydreaming. It's a very specific kind of craving. It's called bhava tanha. Basically, it's the craving to exist in a different, better state. It's that subtle little belief that your real practice, your real peace, well, it's somewhere else. It's definitely not here, in the middle of all this friction.
Okay, so if the problem isn't the annoying people or the stressful situations outside, then what is it? Well, the real conflict is actually inside, with two core inner struggles that show up in these really subtle, what you might call operational ways.
And look, when we say sensual desire at this stage, we're not talking about craving a Ferrari or a 5-star meal. Not at all. It's much smaller. It's that quiet, nagging voice in your head that's always trying to bargain with reality. It's that feeling of, entitlement to comfort. It's the thought that just goes, you know what? This is too much. I shouldn't have to deal with this.
Same with ill will. It's not about, explosive rage. It's that super familiar, low-grade irritation you get when you're stuck in traffic. It's that little bit of contempt for a difficult coworker. It's that quiet wish that if everyone else would just get their act together, your life would be so much easier. It's really just a subtle demand for the world to rearrange itself just for you.
So what do you do about these little desires and frustrations? Well, the key is this really powerful mental flip. You have to reframe it. These challenges, they're not obstacles to get around. They are the essential fuel for your growth.
This is it. This is the crucial point. It's a fundamental choice in your mindset. So ask yourself, are you just gritting your teeth and enduring the present because you think you'll get to escape it later? Because that just leads to resentment and a really fragile kind of patience. Or are you actively using the friction of this moment as the very fire you need to transform yourself? Because that is what builds real anti-fragile strength.
And this isn't a new idea. This ancient wisdom points right to this path. It says true freedom. It's not about getting what you want. It's about letting go with a desire for a different reality completely. It's about finding that liberation right here, in the middle of everything.
So eventually, if you stick with it, if you stay in that heat, a decision gets made. But, and this is important, it's probably not the dramatic, heroic moment you might be picturing. Yeah, there's no thunderclap. It's almost never some big emotional vow you make on a mountaintop with a movie soundtrack swelling in the background. The real shift? It's way quieter, much more down to earth. Instead, it's just this. It's a quiet, pragmatic refusal to keep playing that old game. You just stop. You stop indulging the fantasy of escaping. You stop trying to bargain with reality. You just accept that the work is here, it's now, and you get on with it.
And this quiet decision, it lines up perfectly with this timeless Stoic wisdom. Think about it. You don't get stronger by avoiding the weights at the gym, right? You get stronger by lifting them. It's the exact same idea. The mind is forged not in comfort, but in challenge.
So what does this strength actually look like in real life? What are the powers you get at this stage? Well, they're not supernatural.
We're talking about the deeply practical skills of patience, forgiveness, and endurance. And they are all forged through thousands and thousands of tiny, quiet repetitions of choosing commitment over escape.
And that really leaves us with a final, pretty powerful question to ask ourselves. What's the real nature of our own endurance? Are you genuinely engaging with your life, with all its messiness, or are you just waiting for an exit ramp that might never show up? Because the path you choose, well, that makes all the difference.
Today, we're going to explore a totally different kind of confidence. It's not about being the loudest person in the room or projecting more power. Actually, it's about being quieter, more stable, and in the end, completely unshakable. So let's dive in. He who knows others is wise. He who knows himself is enlightened. Wow. This quote from Lao Tzu really gets to the very heart of what we're talking about today. You know, true strength, like what this image represents, isn't really about conquering the world out there. It's about understanding the world in here. That self-knowledge, that's the real bedrock of confidence. So let's just stop and challenge a huge assumption we all have. We're taught that confidence is about feeling powerful, right? Feeling certain, feeling strong. But what if that's just not the whole picture? What if a confidence that relies on everything going your way is actually the most fragile kind there is? And here it is, the big idea for today. Real lasting confidence isn't about flexing on the outside. It's about building mastery on the inside, specifically over our automatic, knee-jerk emotional reactions. It's a fundamental shift from trying to dominate situations to just being stable within them. Okay, so that brings us to our first major concept, something the source material calls the hybrid threshold. And this isn't just about learning a new skill. It's about stepping into an entirely new way of experiencing your life. Now, what's so cool about this is just how subtle the shift is. It's not about rejecting the world or saying no to pleasure. The old way is that feeling of clinging, that anxious need to hold on tight. The new way, it's just appreciating things. A great meal, a beautiful sunset, whatever it is, but without that deep, nagging anxiety that it's going to end. And you know what? The experience can actually become so much more vivid because that fear of losing it is finally gone. The source calls this state the anagami stage, which translates to non-returner. And the best way to think about it is like you're living on a bridge. You've still got one foot firmly planted in the everyday world, sights, sounds, all of it. But your other foot is stepping onto something more stable, something more transcendent. You're just not frantically running in circles anymore. So with that foundation in place, let's take a closer look at how this completely redefines what confidence even means. We're going to have to throw out the old dictionary definition and look at something way more practical. First things first, let's be super clear about what it isn't. This kind of confidence has absolutely nothing to do with just being optimistic or feeling certain that things are going to work out. It's a deep inner stability that stays the same whether you win or lose. And this is a big one. It is not about building up a bigger ego. It's not about puffing out your chest or creating this strong self-image. And why not? Because any image, no matter how strong, can be shattered. This new confidence actually comes from relying less on that fragile idea of me. Okay, so here's the nuts and bolts of it. The source calls it operational confidence. It comes from something called reduced automaticity, which is just a fancy way of saying you're not getting hijacked by your own reactions all the time. And the real way to measure it, it's not about avoiding pressure. It's about how stable your response is when you're under pressure. How quickly do you bounce back? That's the real test. This distinction is everything. Seriously, it's not about becoming some kind of fearless superhero who feels nothing. It's about this shift right here, moving from being helpless, a total puppet to our own conditioning, to having a tiny bit of space, a moment of choice in how we respond. That, right there, is real power. All right, let's make this super concrete with a real-world test case, something we all deal with. The crucial difference between the feeling of anger and what the source calls ill will. Let's be real, nobody is immune to anger. Even when you reach this new threshold, your nervous system is still going to fire. Irritation will still pop up. That raw physical jolt of anger doesn't just vanish into thin air. So the real question becomes, what happens in that little gap between the initial spark of the emotion and the final intention we form? Because that gap, that's where everything changes. This table lays it out perfectly. Anger, That's just a fleeting emotion, a flash of heat in the body. You can notice it, contain it, and then let it go. But ill will, that's what's called a fetter, like an emotional chain that ties you down. It's sustained. You chew on it, you brood over it, you feed it stories to justify it, and then you act on it. That's the huge difference between a spark and a forest fire. And this quote just nails it, doesn't it? When you hold on to that intention to harm, that burning hot coal, you are always the first person who gets burned. So let's zoom out a bit and see how this internal shift starts to build outward. Because this stuff, it doesn't just stay locked inside you. It creates this quiet ripple effect on the world and on everyone around you. The source calls this the multiplication effect, and it's basically just social physics. It's so simple. When you respond to a heated moment with calm, you automatically de-escalate the whole situation. When you hold firm, stable boundaries, you cut down on the drama. And when you speak without that reactive sting, you invite the other person to actually think instead of just firing back. And here is probably the most powerful part of this whole thing. You start to influence your environment not by telling people how they should be, but just by embodying a different way of being. People see that you are visibly less burdened by life's nonsense, and that example is 1,000 times more compelling than any lecture you could ever give. This is such a great question to just sit with for a minute. Think about it in your own life. What's your go-to strategy for influence? Is it instruction, argument, trying to convince people? Or is it trusting that your own stability can create a quiet space for others to maybe change themselves? All right, to wrap things up, it's so important to understand that this kind of transformation isn't some overnight hack. It's a long-term path, and it requires some serious dedication. This table gives us a fantastic before and after snapshot. Look at the shift. You move from a confidence that's all tangled up in your self-image to one that's rooted in your own stability. Anger goes from this frequent, lingering blaming story to just a brief flash of heat with no malice behind it. And your influence? It becomes a consistent, stabilizing force for good. And I really want to land on this point. This is not magic. What might look like some kind of miraculous change from the outside is in reality the result of years, maybe even decades, of consistent, rigorous inner work. It's the fruit of real dedication. And we'll end with this powerful image. This is the goal, right here. Not a confidence that needs to shout or prove itself, but a quiet, deep stability. An inner solidity that, just like a rock, stays completely unmoved by the passing winds of praise, blame, fortune, or failure. Have you ever had that feeling? You know, like you're on this long journey, searching for some kind of peace, but you have this nagging suspicion that what you're looking for is something you actually lost a long time ago? That this whole quest isn't really about finding something new, but just finding your way back home? Well, that's the powerful idea we're going to explore together right now. In this explainer, we're diving deep into that exact journey, using the ancient story of the prodigal son as this incredible metaphor for our own spiritual lives. And here's the kicker. This return home, it's not some big heroic victory lap. Nope. It's a quiet, humbling realization, a remembering of a peace that, believe it or not, was never really gone in the first place. And this quote, this really gets to the heart of it all. It's the foundational truth of this entire journey. The source of peace, the very thing we wander all over the world trying to find, is always with us. It's such a profound idea, isn't it? It suggests the home we're desperately searching for is already right here, right now. So think about it this way. Our journey is really framed as a return. We wander off, we get lost in all the noise and disorientation, we squander our precious energy, and then, eventually, we turn back. This isn't about learning a new skill or building a new identity. It's simply about remembering a state of wholeness we just lost touch with. So where does this journey of remembrance actually begin? Well, it starts with a process of unification. The first major stage of this return home is a process called unification. And it is so critical that we get what this actually means because, honestly, it's misunderstood a lot. Okay, so first things first, let's just get one huge misconception out of the way. Unification is not about dissolving into the universe in some vague, floaty, mystical sense. The actual work is way more practical, way more internal. It's about healing the fragments inside ourselves. Reducing all those inner arguments and contradictions that pull us in a million different directions. And the result of that work? It's a really profound shift in how you experience everything. Instead of feeling like you're this collection of competing parts, the five senses over here, the mind over there watching them, it all starts to feel like a single coordinated system. The Source uses these beautiful metaphors, like folds in the same cloth, or knots in the same rope. See? It's all one substance just expressing itself in different ways. So, as this sense of unification gets deeper and more stable, we start to approach a really critical threshold. In old alchemical terms, this is the final test of albedo, which means the whitening phase. It's all about the purification of the self. And this test is often called crossing the abyss. Now, this isn't just another step on the path. No, this is a significant barrier, a real test, and crossing it requires a very, very specific kind of purity. There's a guardian at this gate, so to speak, and it's testing for one thing and one thing only. In some esoteric traditions, this guardian is symbolized by a figure named Koranzon, the demon of dispersion and egoic chaos. Of course, we're not talking about a literal monster. It's a symbol for all the forces inside our own ego that try to scatter our focus and hijack our spiritual path for personal gain. So, here's the crucial part. The one thing that absolutely guarantees you fail at this threshold is having a secret agenda. What's that? It's any hidden motive, any concealed bargain you've made where you're practicing not for its own sake, but to get something out of it. You want to be seen as wise, you want to gain special status, you want to feel superior. If you have that hidden deal going on, the ego just reinstalls itself through the very act of trying to get rid of it. And this, of course, brings us to a very personal, very direct question. Let's be brutally honest with ourselves for a second. Do you ever daydream about the recognition you'll get for all your spiritual progress? I mean, if you achieved perfect, unshakable peace, but absolutely no one ever knew about it, would you still want it? It's a tough question for sure, but it's a necessary one. Okay, but what happens when you pass this test? When your intention is pure and you actually cross that threshold? Well, the changes aren't just some abstract theory. They become real, observable, practical traits in your everyday life. This is the state that's sometimes called the non-returner. So here are the markers. First, you stop fighting temptations because they genuinely lose their pull. It's not about willpower anymore, it's just a simple lack of interest. Second, you stop hiding your kindness, for fear of looking weak or naive. It just flows naturally. And third, while anger might still pop up, it just passes right through you. It never has a chance to harden into a grudge. Your emotional recovery time becomes incredibly fast. And all of this leads to a state that the source material calls karmic hygiene. And I gotta say, I love that term. Your mind essentially becomes a self-cleaning oven. Wholesome thoughts, wholesome actions, they just start happening automatically. Not because you're forcing them, but because that's just the new default setting. To put this into a different but totally parallel framework, this state corresponds to what's known in Buddhism as the stage of the anagami, or the non-returner. And at this point, two really significant mental chains or fetters are just completely severed: sensual desire and ill will. The deep gravitational pull of sensory addiction and that deep-seated anger is just broken for good. Now, once you grasp all of this, you can look back at the whole journey. The wandering, getting lost, all that time spent in the dark in a completely new light. And you realize something incredible. It wasn't a mistake. And this is the big reveal. The journey away from home was a necessary circuit. Think about it. The self that left that peaceful garden state was innocent, sure, but it was also ignorant of its own true nature. The self that returns, it's fully awake to it. You had to leave, not to escape, but to gain the consciousness you needed to truly inhabit the peace that was always, always there waiting for you. So this journey home, this completion of the albedo or whitening process, it really marks the end of a major alchemical stage. But as with any profound path, the work is never entirely done. This ending is also a new beginning. At this point, the alchemical white stone has been found. The self is later, it's unburdened by old grudges and resentments, and it's been freed from the heaviest chains of identity. There's a deep, stable calm that permeates everything. But a question remains. And this is the question that defines the entire next stage of the journey. Is this profound peace the final destination? Or is it actually a foundation, a stable base from which to engage with the world more fully, more fiercely than ever before? Are you content with just being calm, or do you feel the pull to test that calm against the fire of life itself? And that's a question only you can answer.